Here is where I get to set my spirit free. Here is where I find my naturality. Where are we going?
Where are we going? Today we will be discussing the election results on society. Today our guest is an outstanding Africana Studies professor here at Stony Brook. He is also a Boston native, a husband, a father, an activist, an author, and he might just appear in the Netflix documentary The 13th. I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Zebulon Miletsky. Thank you for coming today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, we hear the sirens in the background. Can you tell me a little bit about working from home?
Right. You could. It's a lot of things happening, but yeah, these are the joys these days of working from home. In the midst of a lot of moments taking place right now, so this one's not necessarily related to the topics we have to talk about, but you could make the connection that probably any one of them.
Yes. So, this year is the first year that I was able to vote in the presidential election. However, I'm from Texas, but I'm attending Stony Brook, so I had to vote via absentee ballot. But the directions for the ballot were extremely complicated, and the postal service is going a little slow right now. So I had to physically mail in the application for the ballot, and then they had to physically send me the ballot, and then I had to send the ballot back, all before November 2nd or November 3rd. I'm sorry. And that's a lot. So I think that I experienced voter suppression. What would you say are the modern forms of voter suppression?
Yeah, and thank you for that question. It's a good question. I think in the midst of the times we're living in the midst of multiple pandemics and just all the things that are taking place, um, you have to expand the definition of what is voter suppression, uh, because I think apparently these days voter suppression is whatever the other side, that is to say, the present administration has in store. Whatever they're trying, ends up, So we know that there had been talk about, tampering with the post office and all kinds of, backroom, dealing in terms of one of Trump's, you know, supporters and someone who had invested in his campaign in the past was put in the position. Now that the House, the Democrats caught it and tried their best, but I think to some extent some of that damage was done. Um, we know that we also know that the mails slowed considerably. But I think if the present moment's showing us anything, we really didn't really consider the kind of logistics around all these new kinds of voting. So even just a lot of I saw people that said they never got not in the majority of cases, but occasionally there's been people said they never got their absentee ballot, and so a lot of people. So I think in terms of like pushing back on voter suppression means being crafty, being creative, pivoting. Um, uh, and a lot of people did that. They went and voted early in person, even though it's probably way more inconvenient than just putting it in the mail. But I've heard a lot of these kinds of stories, and I think you have every right to feel that you may have been affected by these kinds of voter suppression efforts. The post office was one of them, um, and then even more kinds of things we've seen. Just the voter ID bills. Things that took have been in place for quite some time, and a willingness to close down polls, pull the strings, to change districts and to change, to really shortchange voters is what it ends up happening. So I think a lot of people are feeling that way, and we need to really look at that.
I agree, especially because, as you've taught me, everyone's vote matters, and you need to get out there.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I mean, absolutely, absolutely. And I think, you know, it got kind of like you wonder if the message was getting through, but obviously, you know, the results of the election that we're seeing show that people did. They did. They got out there and they took it. You know, they really took that to heart. So it seems like you know, it's been effective.
Speaking of votes counting, there's some protests going on right now about stopping votes, well, not stopping the votes, but stopping the count for voting. But then there's counter protests that also want votes to be counted. So, Black Lives Matter protesters were attacked by rubber bullets and tear gas, among other tactics, by the police, who essentially fought the call to end police brutality with police brutality. However, we're now seeing the same behavior by many white supremacists who are disguised as what people like to call patriots, but they're not being denounced by the government. So, at what point will the level of intervention by the government be equal across groups?
Well, maybe after January 20th, you know, and from the way, you know, and I think that those kinds of standards, you know, equality in terms of from the in the eyes of the law is something we just have not seen enough in the last 4 years, and that's been one of the things that is, you know, in key demographics and in key areas, have brought people, you know, back to the polls. Michigan, a state that historically is always, you know, has been blue, you know, was flipped back to blue. You know, some a rebuilding of a blue wall, if you will. But but you know, you're absolutely right. You know, there's a hypocrisy now. There is quite a bit of twisting of what it means to be a patriot, right? Who's a patriot? I'm sure, you know, people who are finding are actively counting for uh, stopping the vote, stopping the process that's one of our most cherished American traditions and what it means to be America, right? Um, and think of themselves as patriots in doing so. So there has to be a whole, you know, rethinking of who can lay claim to that title. Um, but right now we're in such a, you know, we're in a grand kind of like fight for democracy, a fight to restore that, just the kind of thing that you're talking about, a little bit more of a uh, um, democratic, you know, sense. There's a twisting of the law right now. There's an effort to, uh, uh, you know, to confuse, to rob and steal people's sacred, constitutionally protected rights. So people have to, you know, judge that for themselves. But the good thing is that people, you know, people have dusted themselves off. They have not accepted this kind of treatment, and they've fought back, uh, standing in their truths and in the with the protection of the law.
I agree. So, kind of changing gears a little bit. Let me see what time it is. As of 12:41 on Friday, Biden is leading by about 50 electoral votes. How do you think that if Biden wins the election, it will affect Stony Brook?
Well, I mean, you know, yesterday, you know, heard Biden give a brief, you know, statement. He's been making statements here and then, and he said, you know, he'd just been briefed about the coronavirus epidemic, and it really was something comforting about hearing him, you know, sort of say, to know that possibly, as you know, assuming the role as the next president of the United States, that he is on the case, that there's something on the way for people, some relief, not just as a joke, but you know, in a real way, like people have been dying, and it has become a complete joke from this administration, and they got entangled in their own bad policies, and became a super spreader, of the virus itself. President, for one glinting second, it seemed like, well, maybe wonder if he learned something. Nope. So, so, so I think what we can expect is, it will take time, but I think what we can expect is seriousness of purpose in terms of saving people's lives, in terms of, when Biden looked in the camera in the debates and talked about that empty chair at the table, you know what I mean? That's like, we need those kinds of things to shake us out of our current um, sort of just fog of the Trump administration, lies. We have a president who lies every day. This is the first thing you learn as a child, like, not to lie. That's the that's the first one, right? And here we have the president of the United States just um, uh, lying on a daily basis. It becomes hard to conversation with a child tell you everything right there, you know. And the children shall lead them because they know they're learning. My kids are learning, about these kinds of things, lying and not, and what
Speaking of
it means.
lying and the influence on children, how do you think that this will affect us from a cultural and social and racial tension standpoint, especially because a lot of racism is learned at a young age?
Yeah, no, I think I have hope for that. I really do. I mean, I think children seem to have an innate sense that there's great unrest in the land. They see it. They know that the effects of the pandemic all too well. They've been the ones bearing the brunt of it. Um, you know, Makes them not unlike the children in Birmingham. Who who left school to face down fire hoses and police dogs. Children in Boston were desegregated. It's always children. Ella Baker taught us that. That young people come first. They have the courage where we fail, and so even this whole movement currently is a millennial-led movement. It's their generation that pushed back on these things. So I think that it's going to be okay. I think it's causing. I'm in meetings about curriculum for young age children, elementary school, middle school. How can we extend what we do in Africana Studies and African American history to younger children? So I have hope. I think that this is bringing about a new day. It was predicted. It has been called a third Reconstruction by people like Reverend William Barber, who um, uh, that's where we are, and it's a chance to rethink everything from policing to schools to general priorities as a country, and to make the world anew, to come up with a whole new plan for you and I, for people, for human beings. Uh, People are hurting; they need help, and so that's what I think we can hopefully expect. And the children will be right there, leading the way if we follow their wisdom.
Oh, for sure. Well, that's all my questions for today. So, thank you so much for speaking with me. I have really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot.
Oh, thank you. It's your testimony to the work we do, and congratulations to you and all the wonderful things you've been doing, and the important organizing work in this program. Such a big part of it.
Oh, thank you. Bye.
Okay, Nia, thank
Turn
you.
around, don't turn around, just keep moving forward.